Joins us this morning. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Todd. Thanks for having me on.
Good to have you with us here today. We talk about developments in Harrisburg and throughout the district. Let's start with the fact that you've got a town hall tonight, right?
Yes, I do. 6 p.m. at the Cherry Hill Volunteer Fire Company, Cherry Hill Township Volunteer Fire Company in Penn Run. It's sort of a roundtable discussion. Everyone's welcome to come out, sort of get an update on what's happening in Harrisburg. It's good for me to hear from my constituents on what's happening in their communities. We've had one in Clymer and one in Armagh so far this spring, and it's really nice to interact with people face to face since we're getting over the COVID protocols and really learn what's happening in the communities and how I can help.
What are people saying? What are some of the things that have come up?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of concerns with the inflation right now, with the cost of gas, with really the cost of living for everyone. I still hear a lot of comments related to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and trying to protect our local jobs here. A lot of concerns with the state budget, spending. There's so many different opinions right now because you do hear one side saying we need to spend, the other side saying we need to be more fiscally responsible with the taxpayer dollars. So there's a lot of good conversations that occur. You hear everything from health care to cost of living, to jobs, to everything like that, yes.
We talked about, Reggie, when the governor announced that the rules would be published.
Yes.
And Reggie would take effect, that was immediately afterward. It's been a few weeks since that time. Have there been new developments? Is there a new direction that we need to know about? What's going on with Reggie?
Well, I think at this point, Todd, we're really into the legal process. You know that lawsuits have been filed. I believe additional lawsuits will be filed to try and halt this job-killing policy decision that the governor made 2.5 years ago. We're going to continue to move legislation as needed. I have my bills. Senator Pittman has his bill that are both in the House right now. Actually, my bill passed out of the House and is now in the Senate. Senator Pittman's bill is still in our House committee, I believe. So we do have those as actions as well. But right now, I think you're going to see it play out in the courts for the most part.
On a national discussion I was listening to last night, the state of Illinois going through much the same thing in terms of maybe not a RGGI, not a regional greenhouse gas initiative, but in terms of decommissioning coal-fired power stations and trying to get rid of power plants that burn carbon. Mm-hmm. And their discussion centered on something I had not heard was being discussed before, and that was that if you're replacing them with wind turbines or with solar farms, then a lot of states are going to have to start acquiring land and maybe even seizing land. I've not heard that discussion here in Pennsylvania, but that is something else that's a part of the entire conversation.
Well, and you do have to think about that, though. There are environmental impacts that come with windmills and solar farms. You're taking up farmland, you're taking away green space. Windmills create hazards on their own, and then you have the lifespan of these facilities that really, once they decompose or they're decommissioned, what do you do with them? And that's one of the problems that I think you have right now is, how do you get rid of all these solar panels? How do you get rid of these windmills that aren't working anymore? And that's one of the questions that need to be answered because they don't last forever either. And so that's part of the discussion I think that needs to occur as well. And look, you're taking away, in most cases, farmland. You're taking away trees or grasses that serve as their own carbon control measures. And so I think there has to be a balance with that as well.
In the hallways at the Capitol, of course, there are people on both sides of the argument. For those who are on the other side of the argument, what are some of the conversations that you have with them? I'm sure that they're just as passionate about the RGGI as you are against it, that they are for it.
Well, I think more and more people are realizing that even if Pennsylvania enters into RGGI, it's going to have a very, very minimal impact on global climate change. What they are realizing, though, is it's going to have a tremendous impact on our local jobs and our state economy. And I think more and more of my colleagues from both sides of the aisle are hearing it from their constituents. They're concerned with the way the country is right now with inflation, with the cost of living being so high that people's electrical bills are going to go up, which is pretty much a known fact at this point, that because it's going to be passed on to the consumer, they expect that the home energy costs for electricity are going to increase by about 30%. So more and more people are hearing it from their constituents. They're hearing it from the building industries, the trade industries, that we're going to be losing our jobs, and really these jobs that they're promising are not going to be apples to apples jobs, even if they do in fact even materialize. and you're already seeing capital investment in energy production go to Ohio and West Virginia. So I think people are starting to open their eyes to realize that there is not a good balance here. The trade-off for a minimal impact on global climate change isn't worth what it will do to Pennsylvania. And I think, and I'm hearing that from both sides of the aisle, that more and more people are realizing that.
You had some legislation introduced in the past week. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we introduced a bill that would increase the reimbursement rates for home health care workers. Through the pandemic, you saw more and more people relying on home health care. We have an aging population, people with disabilities. Agencies like Bayada are increasing their staffing, or they need to increase their staffing, yet they can't do that because really the reimbursement rates right now, Sheets is paying more for their employees than home health care workers. And it's really not fair, and it really jeopardizes some of those essential health care services that people need to have. So I introduced a bill, I believe it's 2583, that would increase those reimbursements as part of our budget process to give these home health care workers the pay that they deserve and need, and also make sure that those services are there for people who need them in their homes. Because the cost to send someone to a nursing facility or an in-house care facility is much greater than it is to treat someone at home. And in many cases, it's healthier for that person to stay in their home-based environment and receive those services. But if we're not paying people fairly and we're losing people, because those are not easy jobs, obviously, to take care of someone in their home. A lot of times, you're doing a lot of physical work to take care of that person. And these people really care. That's how it came to me. A mother whose son was injured in an accident came to me and said, I love my home health care worker, but she's stretched so thin because there's not enough staffing. They can't hire people because they can't pay them enough money. And so that's how this came to me. And I went out and I actually visited with this young man and his family, and I saw the need. And so I was really happy to be able to introduce this legislation. I know that it has strong bipartisan support and the support of our leadership. So I'm hoping that we can get that done as part of this budget process to give these home health care workers the pay that they need, and also to make sure we have these services available for people when they need them.
Well, you mentioned the budget process. How is it going? We're, less than 2 months now away from June 30th.
Well, I think it's going to be a challenging process. We have a lot of people asking for additional funding. In many cases, rightly so. In other cases, not so much. You rarely see someone come in and say, hey, I don't need that much money, take some money back. These state agencies don't work that way. And so the challenges we have, yes, we're doing well with revenues right now, more than expected, but there's a cliff coming. And I think a lot of economists are realizing that with inflation right now, with the cost of consumer goods being up 8.5% from this place where we were last year, the highest inflation rates in decades, we're going to see a recession coming soon. And so that's the concern that I have, and I think a number of my colleagues have that too. If you spend everything we have right now, and a lot of people are even talking about spending the reserves, what happens when we don't have money to provide those essential services to people? So I think it's going to be a lot of discussions, but we ultimately have to get to a balanced budget where expected revenues, not just the revenues we have in reserve right now, meet the spending. And that's really the concern. We have to be responsible for taxpayer dollars. And if we spend everything we have right now and there's nothing left when we do need that money, where does that money come from? And the last thing we need to do to people right now is to raise taxes. So we need to make sure that we're being constrained with the spending, yet also meeting the needs that are out there.
Chancellor Greenstein, as part of all of this, met for his required meeting with the legislators.
Yes.
And gave an update just last week. Were you satisfied with what he had to say?
Yes, I was there. I think that the state system has made tremendous progress in addressing their fiscal responsibility, to right-sizing, if you will, to combining the universities. Now, the legislature gave them the ability to be flexible. The system redesign was put together by the Board of Governors and by the Chancellor. I think it is moving the state system in the right direction. Obviously, you're seeing that IUP was able to offer a tuition reduction. The state system is asking for about a $75 million increase in their line item, and I will be supporting that in this budget process because I think they have done the heavy lifting. We want to see the state system survive, not just survive, but grow, to be what it was meant to be, and that's affordable higher education. And I think we can see that. I think that now that they've turned the corner, we can see that as the future for the state system of higher education. But we still have a way to go. I think the Chancellor has done a great job as far as maneuvering the ship in the right direction because it was floundering. You had a lot of these universities that were failing, basically taking the revenues from other universities like IUP that were doing well. So I think we've seen them do the heavy lifting, and now I think we need to show them that we appreciate that by giving them this increase in their line item budget.
I know Chancellor also in an editorial in the Allentown Morning Call pointed out that good, strong state system, and he said system universities, those are going to be the key to climbing out of the workforce problem that we have in Pennsylvania. Not enough people for the jobs that are out there, which seems kind of odd to say.
Right.
But if we can't put people in the jobs because we don't have enough people, and he says the state system is the answer there.
Well, I believe it is as well. I think you need to be flexible with your curriculum based on the workforce. There are a lot of needs out there that we didn't see before, and higher ed has changed. I think they have adapted to provide more programs and courses that help meet that workforce need. I think that you have to do that in education because the dynamic of our world has changed so dramatically in the past 2.5, 3 years, not just because of the pandemic. We knew that was going to happen, 5-year, 10-year projections showing where you're going to need your workforce. And I think that the state system has opened its eyes to realize that we need to provide the education that people want so they can get those good jobs, without taking excessive amounts of student loans and things like that.
Lastly, with State Representative Jim Struzzi, a primary election coming up, and
Yes.
the legislature has been very concerned with election integrity. I know there have been steps taken with the election on the way in a couple of weeks. Are you satisfied with that the state is in a solid position and on good footing?
Well, things really haven't changed from the previous election, Todd. We've introduced a number of pieces of legislation, House Bill 1800, House Bill 1300, that would have provided greater election integrity, greater confidence for the voter. So I think we still have a way to go in that front. This election is going to proceed much like the other ones did, but I think you're seeing more people realize that there needs to be some meeting in the middle for those that like the mail-in voting and other things like that. But there needs to be an assurance that every vote is going to be counted only once. Make it, as they say, easy to vote but harder to cheat. And I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Now, you mentioned Cherry Hill Township tonight. Is that
Yes.
the last of your town halls?
That is the last of my town halls for this spring. That's at 6 p.m. tonight in Penn Run at the Cherry Hill Township Volunteer Fire Company.
Very good. Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming
Thanks
in.
for having me on, Todd.
He is State Representative Jim Struzzi with us this morning, and it's the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM, AM 1160.
The First Commonwealth Community Calendar is on the air, and now it's online too. That's great news for WCCSradio.com. You can view the First Commonwealth Community Calendar anytime.